Meg Ryan here with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Everyone's just coming on board for a City Council networking roundtable, and I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Mendenhall to talk about how you guys are going to chat today.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you all council members across the great state of Utah and in your respective cities for joining us for this final session of the general annual session of the league conference. It's been pretty different, obviously, of doing this virtually and digitally, but it's good to see your faces, see your names, and see some of you I've met before, some of you I haven't. If you're in a place you could do it, flip on your camera so we can see your beautiful faces, and we can have a discussion together about some of these issues. I did let Cam know that obviously, just like it always is in municipal government, he's hosting a mayor's roundtable where a bunch of pontificating will happen, and we're hosting the council members where the real work is done, right? And so you see, it just popped up on my screen, the polls. Welcome, who do we have in the session today? I hope everybody is saying council member. That's what I'm, that's okay, Robin Troxel. You don't have to turn your camera on, that's just fine. Submit who you are so we know who we are. Just love to attend conferences. Why is that even an option here? There's got to be nobody that just loves to attend a conference. But this conference is fantastic. This conference has been something that, as a council member from Spanish Fork for 6 years now, I've attended the conference for the League of Cities and Towns, both mid-year and annual, every single time. The only one I missed was when our young son was born, who's now 4, and had some complications. So I didn't come up that year. But every year I've learned something different. I've learned something valuable. I've definitely made connections and networked with people that I've learned just how to be a better person, but how to govern better as well. So I hope that's what you get from this session here, that we can precipitate some dialogue, some discussion, and we can overall, what I tell people about the league in Spanish Fork, they don't necessarily know what the league is, but what I do tell them is we are two things. Number one, we share best practices. We don't reinvent the wheel necessarily all over our cities and towns across the state. We share best practices of what's worked and maybe what hasn't worked. Number two, we are a huge advocate for our residents, for our citizens. They don't make it up to Capitol Hill, and they especially don't make it up in the cold winter months of when we're in session. But we are up there, and we are talking about bills and about legislation. Meg is always talking about land use, right? And one of the very most important things that we deal with in local municipalities. And so we represent them. We're their voice on Capitol here, whether it's in those hearings or whether it's in meetings, whether it's on the floor, whatever it is, we are talking for them as the government closest to people. So again, thank you all for your membership in the league. Thank you for your involvement in this conference. I hope you've got something out of it, and hope you will get something out of this session. If you didn't like the jokes, don't say anything. I'm just going to go with it that you liked the jokes and they were funny and everybody laughed. But one way or the other, again, this conference and the work you do, I think Jenny Taylor said it so well this morning. If you didn't have a chance to hear that, it really hit home with me in her words of saying, you're wondering if it's worth it. Here's the widow of a mayor and a major who served so much in his community, but in the league and certainly his country. And she replied that it's worth it. So I promise those tough votes, those long nights, the emails, the texts, sometimes now the social media posts that are tough to read, tough for your family to read. told my wife a few times, you shouldn't be on social media for about the next week and a half while we go into this council meeting, because there's going to be some tough issues. And she rarely listens to that, but I'll echo what Jenny Taylor said about that. It is worth it. It's worth it. You do make a difference. You're making a difference in your communities. When the state points to the success of Utah, I can promise you the governor's office knows where that bread is buttered, knows what the difference is, and it's you. It's you and how much you love and care for your community. So with that, we'll get on to a couple of questions here. I think, Meg, can everybody see the screen that I can see? Is that what you've shared with the group here, these questions?
Yes, I hope everyone can.
Okay. So a couple of questions. Kind of how we thought we'd do this is we do have, looks like over 30 participants in this session. And so we'll maybe talk about this top question here as a large group. And then for a couple other questions, we'll break out into smaller groups. And in those breakout sessions, you'll get an invite. Join that, and then discuss some of the other questions that we'll put up there in those rooms. And then we'll come back together and discuss those. But here, this first one, I had Meg keep this one up here out of a group of questions that we were going through. And this one might be just more closer to home, maybe with me recently, because we've had some tougher votes in little old Spanish Fork recently, like I'm sure all of you have in your communities. But this first one, do you ever find yourself voting due to the voices of your loudest constituents? So there's a question maybe for the group there. You can reply by unmuting yourself, or you can put it in the chat room if you'd like. But do you ever find yourself voting due to the voices of your loudest constituents? And maybe before anybody's question pops up, or before anybody mutes, I can tell you one of the best things of my storied political career. How about I call it that, Meg? I mean, 6 years, that's a storied political career, right? Now, one of the first things I learned early on, and it was from Dave Church at a league conference, was about voting, and voting especially on tough issues. Maybe the toughest issue isn't, hey, should we put this park here? Well, everybody likes a park, right? But it does get a little bit tougher when we say, hey, what about this particular land use here? What about higher density residential units in this particular area of your city? Or name, kind of your tough decision. But when those questions come to you as a legislative body to discuss, deliberate, and then make a decision, Dave's instructions was always, hey, talk about it, debate it out in the open. Don't talk about it, to your other council members. Obviously, people already have this idea that the government makes decisions and then they get stuck with it. So I remember him saying, no, discuss it and debate it out in the open so the public can see it. And then boy, vote how you feel you should vote. Vote according to the way that you feel strongly about, and not just strongly emotionally, but strong due to the facts that are presented to you, right? And so that's sometimes how I relate back to when there's a room full of residents that are the loudest maybe in a community, in my community, is I do think back to, obviously, I don't just represent those maybe 30, 40 people in the room, but the 45,000 people in Spanish Fork. And yes, 45,000 is Spanish Fork now. We do have a Chili's, we have a Lowe's, we have a Walmart. So we have grown up in the world of cities. So we're a little bit bigger than we used to be. But yeah, that question right there, does anybody want to take a stab at it? I've already talked way longer than Meg gave me the license to talk for. So somebody else talk for a minute.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. This is Matt Durham from Holiday City. I'm a pretty new council member. I just started in January. And I don't know that I've had the experience yet of voting due to the voices of the loudest constituents, but I have definitely had the experience of having the loudest constituents sort of draw my attention to what I'm thinking about, or the issues that are on my internal agenda about what's going on in my city and my district. And I've tried to be a little bit careful about that and realize that, as you said, Mike, that just because they're the loudest doesn't mean that they're the predominant view or the only view, but I've had that experience for sure.
Thank you, Matt. That's valuable. That's valuable insight. Let's see, M. Honer Orton. Let me read that. Let me read that in the chat box just barely. That said, I get it that the loudest voices are often not in the best interests of the town's mission statement. That's a good point. The town's mission statement, maybe your tagline, your motto that you live by wherever you live. Obviously, when it is an issue that is the closest to somebody, maybe where they live in your community, they're going to be the loudest voices on it. I can tell you from some of my experience, a good result has been to always step outside that, right? Obviously, take their input, take their emails, take their texts, their suggestions, and thank them for being part of that process. But also make sure we're broadening our reach outside of that, that we are reaching now out to somebody outside that neighborhood. And part of what I like to start with that, and I'm just speaking of a recent land use decision in Spanish Fork, was that the discussion I had maybe from people not in the immediate neighborhood was, hey, what do you think about this? This developer wants to do this on this land down here in this area of the city. What do you think? And their response was, well, what do I care? I don't know. No, I didn't even know about that. Why would I care? Yeah, go ahead, whatever. My response to them was, well, what if it was next to your neighborhood? What if instead of this field here that we're talking about that's empty, what about if we were talking about the field that's next to your house and this was what's going to be discussed there? Oh, okay, all right, I see what you're saying. So I had some people respond to me a little bit different that way when you contextualize it for them and say, it's really easy again, and you've all heard it in your respective communities of people saying, well, I don't mind that use, I just don't think it's here. And where they don't think it should be is where? Right next to their home, right? They don't think that use should be right next to their home. But it's perfect for everywhere else in the community, just not right there. And so it is discussing the larger, and I know I blame Meg for this because this is revolving around land use here, and she's just the land use expert. But when we're talking about that especially, it's on us to broaden that and make sure those loudest voices that we are hearing from understand that it is the whole city we're representing for sure.
We have a couple other comments in the chat box.
Oh, I see them right here. Okay, let's see. As stated, the loudest isn't the majority, so just listen. I know that many can't attend the meetings or sending emails, so what you see are not always what you get. Just be a good listener. Boy, I like that, Council Member Vanderwood. Just be a good listener. I think that's very important to remember throughout your public service. Michelle Randall, occasionally my loudest constituents may think I'm voting because of them, but I always vote based on what I feel is best for the community as a whole. I wish I could chat, but I'm fulfilling my council role and grandma role right now. I have a 2-year-old grandson sleeping on me and don't want to wake him up. That's pretty much public life in a nutshell right there, Michelle, that you're doing double duty, which is what we're all doing in our respective cities. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think those 2 points are important. Number one, just be a good listener, right? People do just want you to listen. So they're not always up for the arguments of, hey, here's this, and then you throwing it right back. I've learned that. Just be there to listen for a little while. And then second, to Michelle's point, I think that's great advice as well. When you're going to vote, when it comes time to vote, and maybe we don't do this good enough in Spanish Fork, I think we could get better at it, is explaining your vote. Now that always doesn't need to happen, right? But sometimes when it's an issue where there is some loud voices in your community, what a great point to say, I'm not voting this way just because I think I've heard the loudest voices. I'm voting this way because I've done my research, I've done my homework, and I feel this is the best thing for the community. Because the clearer we can be about that, the better we are on the next land use decision, the next tough decision that's coming to your city. You certainly don't want it to just be a playbook for people. Hey, when we really got riled up and made enough noise at the city, they did this for us. They went this way for us. That precedent's tough to set because you're just setting yourself up probably for years, maybe decades of tough land use decisions that may come down the pike. Okay, anybody else on that was a great discussion, I think, for that first question. Meg, do you want to break us out into some chat rooms and talk about the other ones?
Right, I think Evan will, our IT tech, which we thank for being on the line today, will break you out into some individual groups, and we'll take probably about 15 minutes just to talk to each other. What is the most valuable lesson you've learned from constituents this year? Also, maybe what are you hopeful for? And a chance for you to introduce each other and network, and then we'll come back as a larger group. So you'll see a request to join the breakout session, and that will happen in a second, and we will see you back here shortly.
That was a great discussion with my group. Jarrett from Santa Clara, Donna from Eagle Mountain, and Vern from Clearfield. 3 different cities in all different phases of growth and development. But some great discussion back and forth of why they were elected, what they were elected to do, and how they're helping their cities. Jarrett didn't get time, so I told him as soon as we come back, we didn't have enough time there, Meg. We were doing pretty good. So I told Jarrett that he could let us know in Santa Clara what the issues are, why people elected him, and how he's dealing with listening to people, but also not always just listening to the loudest voice as well. Go ahead, Jarrett.
All right, yeah, and actually on that question of like listening to the loudest voices, we did have a recent issue where I think I can kind of twist that question just a little bit. We had a commercial development come in, and the neighbors always knew it would be commercial, but the building design was a little different than they ever expected. And so those were the loudest voices, the ones that wanted it to be a certain way. And the council kind of really wrestled with that. And the way that I kind of listened to the loudest voices, but not totally, was I knew our community wanted that development to happen, but I did try to get a few concessions out of the developer to help those loudest voices feel like they had been heard. And in our breakout, I listened to Vern talk about how he is viewed as one of the listeners on the council. And I got that same sort of feedback. I did go meet those citizens in their homes that were right by the development. I did respond to the emails. I did look at the Facebook posts, and it did go a long way. I was outvoted on a couple of my motions, but in the end, I did vote for the development to go through because I did know that's what the community wanted. So in the end, I think it's going to work out okay. I have seen some renderings for the building, and the developer is giving some of those concessions. So I did listen to the loudest. Wasn't able to get everything they wanted, but I did get some of it, so that helped.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks, Jarrett. Thanks to your good work for the people down there in Santa Clara. If I may, I wanted to just and we've got a few more minutes that anybody can speak up or type what they learned as well. But I want to let you know really quick before this is over that how much advocating on Capitol Hill during the session. I mean, this has been an irregular session, obviously, but during the session that myself, but the board of directors, the league as a whole, tells the legislature about what you guys do, and the reason is we're always fighting for the most local representation and saying, hey, even if they get it wrong in Spanish Fork, they could quickly get it corrected, probably more quickly than what could happen if we pass some state statute, especially as it relates to maybe land use. And so we're always, and sometimes they like to bring up some little detail, some little council meeting, some vote that says here's why we have to take control at the state level on X, Y, and Z. So as a council member, I just want you to have that with you in a thought process, that there are those that would like to say, hey, we'll just remove these tough decisions from you. And we always say, no, we're up for the tough decision. We're up for listening. We're going to respond to emails, and we're going to represent those people and their interests, and we're going to listen to everybody in defending that. A personal story, just a few months ago when we had civil unrest in Salt Lake, and because of my last name and Mayor Mendenhall's last name up here in Salt Lake, people just assumed we're cousins, and I call her cousin all the time. She calls me cousin all the time, but we're not cousins. I had some people in Spanish Fork say, hey, Mike, you really need to call your cousin up there and tell her how terrible of a job she's doing and how Salt Lake's a mess and it's because of this, that, and the other. And what I finally realized, and I replied to a couple of those people, was they said, well, thanks for that. That's fine. But this is why I'm an advocate for local government, because the person that's telling me that would never, ever, ever be elected in Salt Lake City and what they view down in Spanish Fork and how they feel about different things in Spanish Fork. That's the beauty of local government. Mayor Mendenhall has a different constituency than I do in Spanish Fork, and she obviously has to govern in a different way than maybe we would in all of our communities. And so for that reason, that's why I always have, and just you guys to meet and talk to you, it's obvious that's why local government is so effective, is because you do care and love about your communities, but you listen as well. You're good listeners. Again, Meg, sorry, I'm the politician that goes along on everything. If we could open it up, anybody else that would like to share with the group of what you've effectively done in your communities this way. We got a couple more minutes, Meg. I will tell you this, obviously it's not the last tough decision that you make in your respective cities. You know, if you had council meeting this week or last week, whatever, and maybe you have a lull of, making some pretty routine ones for a little bit, but obviously, in your service, your years of service, that you're going to have some tough ones coming down the road. I can tell you, just as a refresher to help me out, I was on the League's website and LUDMA's website just last week with some great little videos that really helped, again, just refresh my role as a council member, what my duties were, especially as they relate to land use. And I even had a couple of members of the community that maybe thought we were making the wrong decision watch some of those videos with me. I shared a couple of those, and just to let them know, hey, so let me show you what an elected official is looking at in trying to do the right thing for the community and trying to listen to everybody and make the best decision. And so sometimes I would let you, invite you, I guess, that way to make sure to check out the League's website, LUDMA's website. There's some great resources there that are easy, that are quick little videos that remind me of the Schoolhouse Rock kind of videos of this is how this process works. And if you get a second and want that same refresher, I'd invite you to do that. We have, let's see, Jarrett has a good question, I think, right here that says, one question I have is how other city councils collaborate with their planning commissions. Right now, there's a bit of a disconnect between ours, and we're working on solutions to the problem, but would love some ideas. It's a great question. It's a great question, Jarrett. Anybody have any insight into Jarrett's question there? It has a good working relationship with their planning commissions. my old man, my dad just got called to the Planning Commission in Spanish Fork not too long ago. So I think it was a really good relationship before then, and now it's not. They got the wrong guy on there. So,
President Mendenhall, this is Nika Peterson, Clearfield City Council. This has been a high priority for our mayor, Mayor Shepherd, and the council. Our city, we were 30,000, and we've been rebuilding a city that's been in decline for decades. And we recognized really quickly that there had been a real disconnect between the Planning Commission and the council as far as where we were going as a city. And so our land use, just our philosophy really was starting to diverge, and it was causing some friction, because we started to notice, for the first time, that the Planning Commission was sending up recommendations that more and more the council was either going a different direction or vetoing, for lack of a better word. And there was, I think, some growing frustration in our Planning Commission of, so what are we doing here? I mean, what is the point of us even being here? And so our mayor directed staff to have our Planning Commission and the council get together at least twice a year, and sometimes quarterly, to go over where we're at and look at projects that are coming down our pipeline, and to review areas of either our general plan, or we have a downtown small area plan, which is a huge area of emphasis for us, and have a chance for both bodies on kind of neutral turf, for lack of a better word, to really sit and talk to each other and try and understand the direction that we're both trying to head. Recognizing that each group has separate responsibilities and may not always agree. But I think it's provided a voice for our Planning Commission to feel heard, but also to ask questions and be involved way earlier in big projects in particular. For example, we've got a TOD site, that will be worth tens and tens of millions over build out. We've been working on it for years, but our mayor has brought in our Planning Commission, and they've been right with us all the way through it in the early stages. And so as really key, questions have come up as far as form, major challenges to the project, or even just the scope and the direction, both groups have had a chance to talk, bounce ideas off each other, and kind of do a pulse check of where are we heading in the same direction, and do we understand the why? And our hope with that is that each group understands their role in the land use process better, that the Planning Commission understands how critical their vetting responsibility is, and that we as a council really lean heavily on what they're going to do to run that to ground. But then also that the council is going to be the final policy decision and that final word, and that it may not be, there may be differences from a Planning Commission recommendation, but a much more collaborative process that's focused on the same end goal.
I think that's a great way to put it, Council Member Peterson. That Meg typed in while you were talking there, that practice has seen like a meeting between a council and a Planning Commission at the beginning of a year to kind of set some strategic goals and say, this is, are we shared where the city is headed, what direction we want to take it. But I like and a quarterly meeting, that's a great thing to just check the temperature and say, okay, this is what we're discussing. I can tell you from recent discussion, sometimes it's best to, on tough decisions too, we used our Planning Commission probably too much on this, on some of our recent land decisions. The developer redid the project, went back to the Planning Commission. Again, a packed house of people just, yelling at our planning commissioners sometimes of how bad, how wrong this was. And then the meeting again, they got it again, they probably were wondering, what in the heck am I doing here? Why did I ever take the mayor's call, right? And so sometimes I think it is having those meetings offline. They got to be public meetings if we're together, too many council members and stuff. But even those meetings that are separate from the council meetings of strategic goals, I think is a great way to share that rather than maybe just dumping it on them and letting them feel the wrath of some people that are angry about a development or something. So great point. Thank you for sharing that, Councilmember Meg, do we have time for anything else, or are we up against it here?
Absolutely. A few more minutes. We are ending at 2:15, but it's up to you if you want to end earlier or if you want to leave on a positive note and maybe think about what expectations are for the rest of the year. And if it's just getting through it, then that's okay too.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how 2020 goes? You have all these plans about what you were going to do, what your family was going to do, what your city was going to do. And now at the end of it, we're like, well, if we could just get through it, we'll be okay. So, again, if there's nothing else, I would just add my voice to sometimes not too many people that recognize your work, recognize your dedication. It might be the ending of something, of my time as president of the league that makes me a little emotional about it. But I think not. I think it's simply that I know how much you all love your communities. I know how much you make a difference. And I see it in your work. The league sees it in your work, in your involvement, in your willingness to share best practices, and your willingness to speak up and spend your time away from your families, away from your jobs. And again, like Jenny Taylor says, it's worth it. It's worth it. I promise it's worth it. I know you all know that. So thank you again for your involvement in the league. Thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Thank you for your contribution here to the conference. But thank you more than anything for your service. And we will get through 2020. We'll see you in April down in St. George for our mid-year conference. I was going to add that one thing about Planning Commission that we talked about just a minute ago. Spanish Fork has invited some of their planning commissioners to a conference if it's close to them. So maybe not for the whole conference, but maybe for a breakout session or two that deals with land use. I would invite, maybe that's an idea if your city's close to one of the conferences we're holding. I think that's a great team building exercise with your planning commission as well. I know it's helped in our city. But thank you again for all your ideas. Meg, thank you for all you do for the league. You're a great resource and an asset that I don't know how I would do it without you. So thank you for all your good work. And thank you all the elected officials too.